Do you believe that? The most ordinary places can hide the most terrifying mysteries. I used to think that motels were just places to stop for the night. But until I heard about the unexplainable stories of many others, I realized there are places you should just pass by, never enter. Today, I will tell you 3 true horror stories that happened in seemingly harmless motels. But after hearing them, you probably won't dare to stay alone anymore. And now, here we go. Story 1. After a heated argument with my girlfriend, I needed to get away and clear my head. I drove aimlessly until I came across a small, isolated motel on the outskirts of town. It seemed like the perfect place to find some peace and quiet. The sign flickered in the twilight, emitting an eerie glow. The motel was eerily quiet when I checked in. The manager, a middle-aged woman with a tired smile, handed me the key without saying much. My room was at the end of the building, adding to the sense of isolation. The room was modest but clean, with a single bed, a small table, and an old chair. The silence was both comforting and eerie. As the night wore on, the isolation became more pronounced. The only sound was the occasional rustle of leaves outside the window. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the argument in my head. Just as I was beginning to drift off to sleep, strange noises from the next room woke me. Thumps and muffled voices filled the air, followed by a knock on the door. My heart pounded as I approached the door. I hesitated before opening it, half expecting to find someone standing there. But the hallway was deserted. The noise from the next room continued, a mix of curiosity and fear urging me to invent. I stepped into the hallway and slowly turned the knob on the next door. The room was dark and empty, a stark contrast to the noise I had just heard. I turned on the light, revealing a sparse, quiet space. The only thing out of place was a piece of paper lying on the floor in the middle of the room. My hand shook as I picked it up and read the haunting message scrawled in shaky handwriting. Check under the bed. A chill ran down my spine. I wanted to leave, but some inexplicable force urged me to follow the instructions on the paper. With trembling hands, I lifted the sheet, half expecting to find nothing. Instead, I discovered a small dusty box. I carefully pulled it out and opened it, revealing old photographs and a diary. The photographs were faded, showing different people in various states of distress. My heart pounded as I opened the diary. It detailed the experiences of previous guests, each entry eerily similar to mine. They had all heard strange noises, found notes, and discovered this box. Each entry ended abruptly, leaving a chilling sense of unfinished business. A sudden noise from behind startled me. I turned around, but the room was still empty. Panic set in, and I decided to leave immediately. I took the box and the diary, feeling a strange sense of duty to uncover the truth. I hurriedly packed up and checked out, the manager's knowing eyes following my every move. As I drove away from the motel, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The memory of that mysterious message and the forgotten diary haunted me long after I returned home. I spent countless nights poring over the diary, trying to piece together the stories of those who had come before me. Story 2. After a grueling 10-hour drive, I found myself in Xenia, Ohio. Exhausted and in desperate need of a break, I pulled into the first motel I saw. It was an old, run-down place, but my fatigue overshadowed any suspicions I had about the place's strange atmosphere. The neon sign flickered erratically, casting strange shadows on the cracked sidewalk. When I checked in, the motel manager, An old man with a stern expression handed me the keys without a word. His silence was unsettling, but I was too tired to care. I trudged to my room, the dim hallway lighting barely illuminating the faded carpet and peeling wallpaper. The room itself was small and sparsely furnished. A single bed, a rickety chair, and a dresser were the only pieces of furniture. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the hum of the outdated air conditioner. I dropped my bag on the floor and collapsed onto the bed, hoping to fall asleep quickly. Just as I began to relax, a sudden knock sounded on the glass door leading to the parking lot. My heart skipped a beat. Startled, I cautiously approached the door. Outside, in the dim light, stood a man, his face hidden in shadow. He was tall and thin, his clothes ragged and dirty. His voice, calm but worried, called out to me, "Hey, can you help me? Please, I need help." Every instinct told me to lock the door. I refused to open it, my stomach churning with anxiety. "Sorry, I can't help you," I replied, hoping he would leave. But he didn't. Instead, he continued to plead, his tone growing more desperate. "Please, open the door. I won't hurt you. I promise." His persistence was terrifying. I backed away from the door, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Despite my refusal, the man didn't leave. He stood there, his pleas becoming more frantic. As the minutes ticked by, I decided to call the front desk. The phone rang repeatedly, but no one answered. Panic set in. I glanced at the clock. It was past midnight. The man outside continued to knock, his voice growing louder and more insistent. Then, without warning, the knocking stopped. I cautiously approached the door, peering through the curtains. The man was gone. Relief flooded me, but it didn't last long. Suddenly, the sound of shattering glass broke the silence. I turned to see another man breaking into my room through the small window next to the door. His eyes were wild and frantic, and before I could react, he lunged at me, snatching my wallet from the nightstand. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" I yelled, but he was already out the door, disappearing into the night. The room was in chaos, shards of glass glittering in the dim light. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to process what had just happened. Gathering my courage, I called the front desk again. This time, the manager answered. "There's been a break-in. Someone stole my wallet," I explained, my voice shaking. The manager's response was alarmingly calm. "I understand. I'll make a note of it." "Can't you do anything?" I asked in disbelief. He sighed, a tired sound that spoke volumes. "This isn't the first time something like this has happened. I suggest you leave as soon as possible." His words made me sweat. I hung up and hurriedly packed my things, my mind racing. As I drove away from the motel, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. The experience left me with an uneasy sense of vulnerability, a reminder that sometimes the true horror lies not in the supernatural, but in the darkness of human nature. History 3. My father and I were excited to attend a charity event near a peaceful lake in Ohio. We had booked a room at a quaint inn nearby, its charming exterior belying the unsettling events that were about to unfold. When we arrived, the inn seemed like the perfect place for a peaceful night's rest. Flowers were blooming in the garden, and the warm, rustic decor gave it a welcoming feel. The room was simple but comfortable, with windows overlooking the tranquil lake. We spent the evening discussing our plans for the charity event, feeling content and at ease. As night fell, an eerie silence fell over the inn. The silence was almost too perfect, making every creak of the wooden floors and rustle of curtains seem amplified. Around midnight, the peace was broken by a persistent knock on the door. Startled, my father and I exchanged worried glances. The knocking was followed by faint whispers, barely audible but unmistakable. I cautiously approached the door and peered through the peephole, but surprisingly, no one was outside. "Did you hear that?" I whispered to Dad. "Yes," Dad replied, his voice strained. We waited in silence, hoping the noise would stop. However, the knocking continued intermittently throughout the night, accompanied by the ghostly whispering. Each time we checked, we found nothing. Sleep did not come to us as our nerves grew more tense with each passing hour. By morning, we were exhausted from the tension. The sunlight streaming through the window did nothing to alleviate the unease that had settled in the room. Driven by curiosity and a need for answers, we went to the innkeeper to inquire about the occupants of the next room. The manager, a grizzled old man with a sad expression, listened to our story with understanding, but his response sent a chill down our spine. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," he said, his voice grave. "Both your room and the one next door have been empty for years. No one is allowed in there, and certainly no one makes a sound." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken fear. My father and I exchanged horrified glances. The realization that we were alone, but not alone, was the knocking and the persistent whispering now took on a dark meaning, suggesting that we had been visited by something from another world. We checked out of the motel as quickly as we could, the sense of unease hanging over us like a dark cloud. The once so appealing lake now seemed like the backdrop to a nightmare we couldn't escape. As we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if invisible eyes were following our every move. The experience left us with a strange sense of dread that lingered long after we returned home, a haunting reminder of the night we had spent with our invisible visitors.